Sunflowers are pretty amazing, aren't they? And so are bees. Just looking at them, you can see that they are incredibly designed. But when we look at them with math, like other parts of God's creation, we see the wisdom and care God placed in them at a whole new level. To see how, we're going to use what we call a ratio, which is just a fancy name for a comparison using division. We often write ratios as fractions. If I use 4 cups of flour in a recipe and 2 cups of sugar, I would say the ratio between flour and sugar is 4:2, which is really another way of writing 4 divided by 2. In fact, we could simplify it to 2. We're using twice as much flour as sugar in this recipe. Okay, now let's head back and take a look at sunflowers. Notice that the seeds in a sunflower are arranged in spirals and that those spirals go in 2 different directions. If we were to count the number of spirals in each direction and look at the ratio between them, we'd find that the ratio is always about the same for any given sunflower. Now, it turns out that this ratio enables the most number of seeds to fit in any given sunflower. In other words, God created sunflowers to reproduce in the most efficient way possible, fitting as many seeds as they could for their size. Just think of the wisdom and care God took with something like the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. How much more will He care for us? Jesus said, "But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will He not much more clothe you, O you of little faith?" Okay, now let's talk about bees. You probably already know that bees make honey and store that honey in honeycombs. But math helps us see that God gave the bee the wisdom to make those honeycombs in the perfect shape for the job. Now, the ideal shape would minimize the amount of wax needed to build while still providing a sturdy structure and holding as much honey as possible. When we use math to figure out what shape that should be, it's the exact shape a bee uses. And notice that this shape has a hexagonal base. Why use hexagons? Well, if you put most shapes next to each other, you'll find that they leave gaps. That means more wax and effort needed to build, plus less stability. There are a few shapes, though, that can fit together without gaps, minimizing the wax needed and strengthening stability. But which of these would let the bee store the most honey with the least wax? The answer, which we can find using math, is the hexagon. To illustrate, let's look at a couple of shapes that fit together without gaps. If we make the perimeter or distance around the shape the same, the area of the hexagon would be the largest. I've shown this for a perimeter of 1, but it would hold true for any perimeter size. That means that for any given perimeter, the hexagon would enclose more area, or the ratio between the area and perimeter would be the greatest, meaning more honey storage. The hexagon is also nice and sturdy. In fact, some building supplies copy the design of honeycombs to provide strength with few materials and thus less weight, which comes in handy in aircrafts. Now, how did the bee know to use hexagons? Well, God, the master engineer, gave the bee that wisdom. As you study math, remember that math helps us describe God's creation and points us to the wisdom and care of our Creator. We can trust God and cast our anxieties on Him, knowing He cares for us. Join us next time as we look at math and technology and how the very existence of technology points us to God's faithfulness.